So this is our last session, and this is really a follow-on to the previous session, which was about sort of fundraising 101 and the basics. Today, we're going to dive into what is ultimately the most lucrative and the most efficient way to raise money, which is actually talk to people and ask them to give it to you. Now, it is also the scariest way to raise money. So we have to sort of confront that head on. And hopefully today you'll learn some tools and techniques and you'll build your confidence and you'll go out and raise a bunch of money, and that'd be awesome. So let's go to the next slide, please. We started this process, I don't know, a couple of months ago. And if you've been involved in any of these sessions, again, this is the fourth of 4, I'm curious as to what you've used and how it's gone. And what are you using? What have you learned and so forth? So this is a chat opportunity, or you can unmute if you want to speak. There's not a huge group today. So if anyone wants to weigh in terms of what you've used, what you remember, what grabbed your attention, any of that would be helpful. And I'm actually going to ask the colleagues at the Woodruff Foundation. I'm going to pick on a couple of you just to get this started. So Hunter, I noticed you're not muted, so I'm going to start with you. I mean, you've been to all of these. What's one takeaway for you?
Just the ease of it. So I have a master's in nonprofit administration with a concentration in development. And sometimes the ask can seem really scary, but it's really not. And it's really just about having those personable relationships and opportunities to connect with individuals. And that's something really great that you've shown us. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Dee, what about you? Is there one thing that has stuck from these sessions?
I think just the importance of that storytelling, and that's so instrumental with my work with local partners, understanding boots on the ground, what's happening in their communities, and being able to articulate that is really such an important part of this.
And I'm going to see you and raise you. I think storytelling is huge, and I agree with you 1,000%. And the other part of this is story listening and story collecting, and encouraging people to share their stories with you. That's ultimately how we raise money, is people telling you their story. So it's a both and. We have to get good at telling the story of our group, and we also have to get good at, encouraging, initiating other people's stories as well. Meg, you get the last bite from the foundation, because Ree's doing tech, so you're off the hook around this one, Ree. Meg, what's one thing you took away from this?
I think it's one thing that really stuck with me is how it's not just a single point ask. You're developing a relationship with a funder and trying to involve them. And I'm not sure that everybody on with us today realizes that the Bob Woodruff Foundation is a public foundation. So we raise what we grant. And so learning this is really important to us. Yeah,
this is not a place with a big endowment. So they raise it and spend it and pass it on to you in programming like this. So this is great. Thank you, Meg. And you're right. This is all about relationships. That's what we're doing here. All right. So just so you know the process today, Ree is running the slides. Thank you, Ree. We're going to sort of track the chat box throughout. I'm happy to take questions as we go through. Just so you're warned, the central piece of this is I'm going to teach you how to do donor meetings. I'm going to practice one in front of you, a little brief version with Hunter, who's agreed to be the potential donor. And then we're going to break you up into teams of 3 or 4, and you're actually going to practice with each other. So there is going to be a role play. You have been warned. And the beauty of Zoom is we can do breakouts, and it actually is pretty seamless to make it work. And I hope you'll enjoy that part of it. So let's go to the next slide. A little bit of review from the last session. We're calling this major gifts. I want to put the word major gifts in quotes here, because really you decide what major is. I say the word major gift and people think Oprah. And, a major gift for your organization might be $500 or $1,000. And that could be really significant for you. And you know what? That's great. Second point here, there are more donors out there than you realize. Oh, excellent. We have a cat. It's not a Zoom thing without a cat or a dog. So thanks, Meg. It's great. There's at least half of Americans give. Median household giving is approaching $1,000 a year. And I want to share with you, I don't know if we talked about this last time, last year in the midst of the pandemic was a record year. We raised them more money than we have ever raised as a nonprofit community. And the greatest growth was actually donors at 250 and under. So there are a lot of donors out there. You interact with donors every day. They're not a different species. They're your people. I think the big issues around this are how many asks can you do and how many relationships can you manage after people say yes? And if you have systems set up to stay in touch with people and you have folks to go out and engage, then I think the number of potential asks goes up. So shorthand, for most of the grassroots sort of groups we have here, I think a minimum ask for a face-to-face conversation is probably $500 to $1,000 as a minimum. If you want to drive around town and ask people for $50 checks, you are welcome to do so. It's not a terribly efficient way to raise money. And I would say if $500 sounds like a scary number, like I don't know anyone who can give $500, I will point out to you that is $42 a month, which is far less than people are paying for their streaming services or their cable or a whole lot of other discretionary spending. So there's a whole lot of folks who are dropping 40 or 50 or 80 or $100 a month on something that is discretionary. They could give it to you. Let's go to the next slide. Now, what I am really encouraging this evening is face-to-face, asking people in person. I realize the pandemic is a barrier and we may end up having to do more of these on Zoom or more of these on the phone, and that's okay too. But there's a whole lot you can learn about people in person. It's a different experience. And so I always encourage people whenever possible to meet in person, A, because you strengthen the relationship, B, because you get more money. And you know, the math here is that people will give you about 5 to 10 times more money in person than they're going to send you through the mail or give online. They'll give you 2 or 3 times more money in person than they're going to give you over the telephone. So when you can meet. Next slide. Now, in terms of who is a potential donor, there are 3 qualifying factors. The A, this is the ABC, helps you remember. A is ability. Do they have money? And again, I'm not talking about crazy wealth. I'm talking about disposable income. B, do they care? Are they connected to your mission? Do they resonate with what you do? C is contact. Do you have access to them? Because one of the rules in this business is that strangers do not give money to strangers. It just doesn't work that way. So I will stress again, as I did last time, that in order of importance, these are inverted. The contact, the relationship, the access, that's number 1. What they care about, number 2. How much money they have is the least important of the 3. And so we want to think in terms of who are our existing relationships. What tends to happen is that people do this backwards. They ask the question, who's rich, instead of the question, who do we know? And they end up with a bunch of rich strangers that nobody knows, which is frankly not a fundraising list. It's a fantasy list. So that's all the stuff that sort of gets us up to where we're going today. And if you have any questions or comments about any of that or anything we touched on previous sessions, feel free to put them in chat and we'll try and address them. Next slide, please. Now, we have to schedule people. One of the things that I want to stress this afternoon is you don't want to ambush donors. I'm not the guy who knocks on somebody's door and says, hi, can I come in and talk to you about a gift? You really want to schedule these meetings and you want to be transparent about it. So you might have language that goes something like this. We are reaching out to our donors and potential donors, and I'm scheduling appointments, and I want to meet with you. So A, I can learn more about you. B, I can tell you about what we're doing, and C, I can ask for your support. And for me, it's always some combination of those 3 things. Learn about you, tell you about our work. Obviously, I'm looking for a connection between those 3 things. And I want to ask you to give. I'm here to solicit a gift. And otherwise, it's a bait and switch, right? Otherwise, it's sneaking up on people. It's an ambush. And I just think this works better if we're transparent. I think there's no shame in fundraising. And I would rather just say to somebody, my intention here is to ask for your gift. Now, the tools are all the tools that we have. There are actual paper letters. Back in the day, we would send letters to people saying, we're scheduling appointments. I will be calling you soon to set up a time when we can talk in person. That's a long way around. Email works, texting works. You can call people on the phone to schedule if you want to jump right to the phone call to schedule. I mean, any combination of these tools can work. And some of it depends on how well you know the person, whether they're going to pick up the phone if you call, etc. So try all permutations of this. For example, what I like to do now is I'll send somebody an email first saying, I'm scheduling meetings. I would love to have the chance to talk with you in person. If you're interested, email me back and suggest some times. And maybe if they don't email me back, I wait a day or two and then I pick up the phone and I call and say, I'm following up on the email I sent you, hoping to schedule time to sit with you and talk about our work and learn more about you. And my general rule in this business is I will call people 3 times and I will leave 3 messages and then I'm going to give up. After that, it's stalking and you really don't want to be a stalker. Now, if you leave 1 message and you don't hear back from somebody and you don't follow up, no, you got to do better than that. You have to be a little persistent to be a fundraiser. This is how this works. And again, you could switch it up. You might start with email. You don't get a response, you pick up the phone. That doesn't work. You try texting them. You know, and I don't mean in the same afternoon, but you might spread that out over a week. And if you're still not hearing back, you cross them off the list. But I want to remind you, we're not contacting strangers here. We're contacting people that either know you or already have a relationship with your organization, or perhaps somebody for whom you have a friend in common. So for example, I might send an email to Deirdre saying, hi, we have a friend in common. Her name is Meg Harrell. Meg suggested I contact you, thought you might be interested. So this is name dropping, right? And I think we've all done this at different times in our lives. You can use that for this. If I have Meg's permission, if Meg literally says you should talk to my friend Dee Armstrong, Dee's a potential donor, then I'm authorized to do it. And I'm going to go ahead and drop Meg's name and say, FYI, I've been encouraged to call you because I heard you might be interested. So all these tricks work differently under different circumstances with different people. And the main message here is be flexible, but also be persistent. As I say, I want 3 contacts with somebody before I give up. All right, so let's actually talk about the structure of the meeting. Let's go to the next one, please. Go to the next slide and we'll come back to this. Thank you. So what you want to do initially is to build some rapport. Chit chat. How are you? How's the family? Oh, that's a cat in your lap. What's your cat's name? What I want to move to pretty quickly is why I'm there, just so we're both clear about it. My goal this evening is to, again, tell you about the work we're doing, learn more about you. And before this conversation is over, I want to ask for your support because that's why I'm here. And the nice thing about stating your goals and putting it on the table is like nobody's waiting for the shoe to drop, right? You walked in and dropped the shoe. There it is. And you know, this is a sales technique, I will admit it. It's called the double close. And it simply means before you ask for whatever you're asking for, the gift, the sale, whatever, you let them know this is why I'm here. You don't have to do this, but I find it helpful. The third piece is the most important piece. It's what's in it for them. Who are they? Why do they care? How do they connect with your mission and your work? And I think the classic mistake that people make when they're new to this is they show up and they start pitching. Let me tell you about how great we are. Let me tell you about all the cool stuff we're doing. Instead of slowing down and saying, who are you? Why are you meeting with me? Like, why is this of interest to you? So I will model this. Hunter is going to be my partner in a few minutes, and I will model this and I'll do it as best I can. But I really think the most important part of this conversation is not the ask, it's what you learn about the donor. And I'll give you a ratio here. If you're doing a donor meeting and you're doing most of the talking, like if you're talking, I don't know, 2/3 of the time, it's not a good sign. Ideally, it's 50-50 or even 2/3 the other way. Ideally, the donor is doing 2/3 of the talking and you're only doing 1/3. So this is a conversation, it's not a monologue. Now, you do have to talk about your work. And, you know, a little preparation is good. I mean, maybe you're going to bring some show and tell, something you can show somebody, like, here's our new logo, or here's a map of where all our facilities are, or here's 2 or 3 favorite photos of people we've worked with recently. And again, if you're going to share people's names or faces and you have confidentiality issues, you have to be careful with that. At some point, as part of that pitch, you want to make it a dialogue again. So you might present a little information and then say, do you have any questions? Or what do you think about that? Or how does this sound to you? So that it's not just you sort of rattling on. As you've answered their questions and had this engaged conversation, at some point you say, okay, just so we're clear, again, I wanted to give you an update. We've been working on that. I learned a little bit about you, which I'm grateful for. And as you know, this is a fundraising conversation. And if you're ready, I would love to talk with you about how you might support the organization. So what I just did is I asked permission to ask for the gift. If you're ready, I'd like to bring this up. Or, as you know, this is a fundraising discussion. Shall we talk about that now? And the person might say, no, I have a few more questions. Or the person might say, I'm just not there yet. It's like, well, what do you need to get there? Let me know what I can say or what you'd like to say to get us ready to have that part of the conversation. Responding to objections is the stuff we've sort of been modeling. If somebody says, there's so many organizations in our community that work with the veterans. Tell me a little more about how you're different, because I don't understand how you're not such and such group. It's okay. Well, that's an interesting question. We hear that a lot. Let me explain how our work is different from their work. They're also an excellent organization. You should support them too, but I hope you can support us. Now, the last one here is the close, which is simply making sure before you leave the room, you know what the next steps are. And it might be that somebody is ready to give you a gift on the spot. It might be that they need to talk to a spouse, a partner, a business partner, a banker, or somebody to figure out if they're, how much they'd like to give. Maybe they just want to think about it. And so before I leave the room, I'm going to be real clear about, let's figure out what our next steps are so that we know who's going to do what by when. So I might say to Hunter, I'm going to jump into this in a minute. I might say to Hunter, okay, sounds like you're interested. You're not ready to make a commitment today. I understand that. What I'm going to do is get you the material you've asked for. You're going to have a chance to read it, and then I'm going to contact you back in 2 weeks. And at that point, you'll let me know what you've decided. Am I remembering this accurately? And she said, yeah, that's right. That's exactly what it is. And I bring this up because often people hint or imply, and you leave the meeting and you're like, what the hell just happened? Like, did she just make a commitment? I don't really know. So you often want to repeat back. This is active listening. You want to repeat back what you thought you heard to make sure you heard it accurately. All right. So is there anything in chat that's coming up here? Who's ever tracking chat for me? Is there anything in chat that I need to address before we jump into the modeling of the role play?
Just a little affirmation from Zach that says that's his favorite question.
Great. Thank you, Zach. All right. So let's make the slides go away. Now, Ree, I don't know if you have the ability to spotlight two of us, but if you do, the spotlight is going to be me and Hunter. Go ahead and set that up.
Oh, Ree and I might have been doing it at the same time.
Okay, well, let's, there we go. It worked. Good job. So everybody, I'm going to do like a 3-minute version of this. It'll be pretty quick, and then we'll debrief it a little, and then you'll have a chance to practice with each other. So, Hunter, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am well. Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. I'm here to talk with an organization I think maybe you know a little bit about, called Nation's Finest.
I do know a little bit about them, yeah.
Yeah, just before, so I don't tell you stuff you already know, tell me a little bit about what you know about them.
Absolutely. So they are a really great organization out in kind of the California, Nevada area, I think.
Correct. Yep.
Large organization, really long standing, and have just kind of really some great wraparound services like housing and mental health and employment. But that's really all I know about them. Not a whole lot more, but I do know they have a really good presence out there.
And I know you work at the Woodruff Foundation. Do you have military family in your background? Are you ex-military? How do you connect to the military community?
Absolutely. So my husband is actually a Marine Corps veteran and currently in the National Guard as well. So a really close personal connection kind of on a daily. And then I have some other relatives who are in the military as well.
And what do you see as the greatest needs in the military community right now?
Really just that support and them knowing that there's people who care about them after they get out. So there's resources and tools for them to be successful I feel like a lot of our veterans miss that aspect or don't get that camaraderie that they got while they were in. And so I really love organizations that help veterans find that camaraderie while also helping them meet those basic needs and get things like housing and figured out. Because I know when my husband transitioned about 6 years, he had a plan, but some of his buddies didn't, and they just were kind of floating for a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. And do you see groups meeting those needs well? Do you think there's good role models out there?
I do. So there's, depending on where you're at in the country and what resources are available dictates that a lot, but there are some really great organizations out there and they do good work.
Okay. So I'm going to pause the role play. Don't go away. I want you to notice that what I'm doing here is open-ended questions, right? I didn't say, have you heard of the group? I said, what have you heard about the group? What needs do you see? Tell me about your experience, right? And I think this is the key thing I can teach you about these sort of discovery conversations is it's open-ended questions. They're not yes or no questions. Do you care? Yes or no? No. Tell me why you care. That's an open-ended one. So going back into the role play here. I was excited to learn about this group, Nation's Finest, and I think you sort of hit the key thing that struck me was that the wraparound services, they're sort of doing everything. There's transitional housing, there's permanent housing, there's mental health support, there's medical support, there's employment training, there's employment placement. It's like a giant bear hug. It's like everything one could need. And it struck me that I had yet to see an organization serving the veterans community that was that comprehensive in their approach.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, say a little more about why you think that might be important.
I think a lot of our veterans don't know where to go, or they get stressed out when they do have an issue come up. If they are, experiencing an issue with homelessness or a housing crisis, that stems multiple needs and multiple resources are needed for that. And sometimes veterans can get really disgruntled if they have to continually tell their story over and over again. And so I think by Nation's First offering those roundabout or wraparound services and really kind of fully supporting the whole person makes a difference and makes it super easy for those veterans to get the care they need.
Well, it is my privilege and honor to see if you'd like to participate in the work of this organization by making a gift. And if that's something that's meaningful to you and you'd like to be a part of it that way, this is a chance to say yes.
Absolutely. I would love to be a part of it, but I'm not sure how much I could contribute financially.
Sure. Well, pause role play. I think one of the things we may have talked about last time, I can't remember because I'm doing a lot of these, is what we call a gift chart. And a gift chart is where you list the different giving levels and it totals your goal. So if you're trying to raise, for example, $100,000, you might have a giving chart that has one gift at $10,000 and 3 gifts at $5,000 and 7 or 8 gifts at $2,500, maybe going down to $500 or $250 or whatever. So what I would do in this moment, if I were meeting with Hunter, is I'd reach into my briefcase, I would pull out the gift chart. And Rhea, if you'll remind me, I'll send you some samples that you can share with the group. I would pull out my gift chart and I would literally pass it across the screen to Hunter and I'd say, the amount is up to you. Here's how we're going to meet our goal is by filling in all these boxes for all these different amounts. So what I'd ask you to do is spend a minute with this chart, look at it, and then pick the gift amount that's meaningful to you, like whatever you think is affordable and significant. That's what I want you to do. So the beauty of the gift chart is you don't necessarily have to say, will you give $5,000? Though there's no shame in that. You can actually say to the donor, here's how we're making our goal. I want you to choose the amount for me because you know what your capacity is and I'm just guessing. So I love me a gift chart because it solves that problem of how much should I ask for? You basically outsource that problem to the donor. All right, now I want to make sure we have time for you guys to practice. So let's give a big round of applause to Hunter. Yay, Hunter. Woo. And you can go back to the single spotlight on this, Rhea, if you would. Thank you, Hunter. Well done. And are there any questions or comments that you want to bring up around that? And I'm getting more clapping in Zoom. That's lovely. Thank you, Zach. Dee says Nations Find is not yet a local partner, and we basically picked them so that we wouldn't play favorites with anybody who's on the call, which is a great way to handle this. All right, so let's go back to the slides. All right, so we're going to go forward one slide, and then we're going to do this pretty quick. We're going to get you into groups of 3, and you're going to do a little practice. If you end up in a group of 4, that's lovely. It still works. And if the next few slides will show you how we structure this. The next slide, please. So here what you're going to have here. You're going to have an asker, you're going to have a donor, a potential donor, and you're going to have an observer who's paying attention and helping to give feedback when it's over. We have time for one round. So if you're feeling brave or you'd really have to learn to do this, be the asker. If you're feeling timid and you just want to listen, be the observer. It's always interesting to be on the receiving end of this. So, you know, being the donor is actually pretty instructive. So next slide. Here's how it works. You're going to have about a minute or 2 to divide up the roles once we get you into the breakout room. You're going to have about 5 or 6 minutes to do the role play. And what we can do is I will put into chat the previous slide where it had the structure. So you'll have that in chat if you need it. Or perhaps somebody can maybe you can do that for me while I'm talking people through this. That was the slide with the 1 through 7. So you'll have a little time to actually do the role play. If you're the donor, you can say yes, you can say no, you can ask questions, you can challenge, I mean, have a conversation. I really want this to be a dialogue, not just a pitch. So talk to each other. And then after about 5 or 6 minutes, we'll just stop the role play. You should be done by then. And you can give each other feedback in terms of what worked, what you liked, what suggestions you have, and you can all provide feedback for each other. That works pretty well. And what we'll do from the main room is we'll send you time cues. So after a minute or 2, we'll send you a little thing that says start the role play, and you better start it if you haven't already. And after 5 or 6 minutes, we'll say, okay, time to debrief it. And then we'll bring you back after about 12. So I think the instructions are clear, but if you have any questions about what we're asking you to do, this is a chance to ask those questions. All right. Reed, do you have the breakout set up? Sweet. So have fun, everybody. If you get stuck, you can always ask for help and we'll sort of beam in from the main room. But other than that, you should have a good time, and it's only 12 minutes. So have fun, and we'll see you soon. And we're going to spend a couple of minutes for hearing about what happened. And then I've got a little more content to share with you before the webinar's over about things you can say after the donor says yes to actually strengthen the relationship. But before we go there, let's spend a few minutes on this. You can do this 2 ways. If you want to use chat, that's awesome. If you want to speak, that's also good. I am curious about what you learned in the last 12 minutes doing this. What's your takeaway from being part of that role play?
I can go, Andy. I got pulled into a room with
You
Zach,
did get pulled into a room, didn't you?
which was great. I'm super excited and love to be able to hear that and kind of connect with our local partners a little bit more. But they had a really great conversation and really was able to bond over the fact that they're both veterans and some shared experiences, their passion for veteran issues. And so even though they may not have fully been on the same page, you know, they were able to get there and really start that relationship or have that conversation. And then Arlen asked some really great questions about numbers and data and what that looks like and how does his dollars support.
Nice.
And so Zach was able to, you know, pull up their annual report and say, we served 120 veterans last year and did $90,000 in services, but you know, that's really low comparatively, and COVID affected that. But with your dollars, we could do much more with that. And so it was a really great banter and back and forth.
Yeah, well done, Arlen. Well done, Zach. Points to Zach for having the annual report handy to be able to look at. That's pretty good. Anything else that you learned, anybody? And again, chat's great, or you can unmute and just talk to us.
Hi, this is Pat, and there were just 2 of us in my group. I was with Frank Lombard, and he played the asker and did a wonderful job. I bought into the project that he wants to do, definitely. And he gave a lot of good information as to how it would help veterans and what the need was for them, and where the outcomes would be if they participated in his program. So I think he did a great job of really as we talked about, painting that story
Yep.
and where it would go.
Thank you. Well done, Frank. Nice. All right. Well, what I think we'll do then is move into the last section here. So go ahead and share the screen again, if you would. Thank you, everyone. Again, the word role play can be intimidating, and I appreciate you jumping in and participating. That's good. All right. So let's talk about after the yes. And there's a lot of questions you can ask when people say yes. There's a tendency to go, wow, it's a success, I won. And there's actually quite a bit of work to do after the donor says, yes, I want to support you. So next slide. Do a little shout out to my friend Harvey McKinnon. He and I wrote an article about this together, so I'm borrowing some of Harvey's thoughts here as well. Next slide. Grateful, enthusiastic. Yes, yes, right? When you hear that, yes, you want to be appreciative of the donor saying yes, because it is a big deal. Now, I'm going to give you 10 questions here. Don't sweat the sequence. You'll find the right sequence with each donor, but these are some things to think about. Next slide. So the first one here is how do you want us to use the gift? And what I want to stress is that the best money is unrestricted money. The best money is the money you get to use however you need to use it. And there is sometimes a feeling like we have to give donor a specific directed thing to give to, like give to our feeding program or give to our housing program, or we're opening up an office in a new community and we need to support that. You know, and if that's where your financial need is, that's okay. But if you pitch it well, donors will give you unrestricted support. If you say your gift supports the whole range of things that we do, and you want to be part of that, this is a chance for you to support everything we do. Next slide. So may we tell people you gave? Would you rather be anonymous? Is it okay if we list your name on our website and our annual report? My experience is probably 85–90% of people like having their names out there. They're good with it. There's some percentage of people who would prefer to be anonymous, and we have to respect that. Next slide. Do you want to honor somebody? Is there someone that we can recognize through this gift? I mean, I have holiday things going with both my sister and my sister-in-law, where we each give in honor of the other to our respective favorite charitable organizations. And that's a standard holiday thing in my family. So, you know, every year I'm making a gift to the Atlanta Community Food Bank on behalf of my sister who lives in Atlanta, and that's her preferred charity there. So honoring somebody with a gift is actually lovely if you choose to do it. Again, the organization, you need to have a way to list that and then notify the person that's being honored. So that they know too. Next slide. Will you tell us why you love us? Can we use your words? I've been known to ghostwrite these. If somebody says, yeah, I'd happy to write you testimony, but I don't have time. I say, well, just give me some words and I'll write it up for you and you can approve it. I mean, that's not evil. People write their own, that's fine too. But, you know, it's one donor saying to another donor, yes, this is important. Yes, I care about this. That's gold. That's worth a lot. So asking for testimonial is good stuff. Next slide. I love this one. I work with a lot of boards, and probably the thing I do most often is board fundraising training boards to raise money. And often boards are phobic or nervous or uncomfortable with fundraising, as many people are. And one of my favorite things to do is invite 2 or 3 or 4 donors to come to a board meeting, either in person or virtually, and do a little donor panel and put them at the head of the table or put them on Zoom and say, you know, I got 3 loyal donors here. This is Sally, who's been given for 5 years. This is Joe, who's been given for 10 years. This is Martha, who's a new donor, but made a really wonderful gift. And I'd love for you each to talk a little bit about why you appreciate our organization and why you give to us. Like, why is this meaningful to you? And it's inspiring to hear your donors talk about why they care. And if the board can actually hear that, then they realize, okay, donors aren't a different species. They're not some class of people that I don't interact with. These are just folks. So yes, I appreciate this one. Let's go to the next one, please. So how do we keep you updated? Do you actually read emails when we send you email? Do you like a printed newsletter? Some organizations still do that. Shall I put you on a listserv of some sort? Can I text you or call you periodically? Would you like me to come and meet with you every now and then and give you a personal update on what we're doing? And the idea here is that you need a database, and you need the database to be able to track this information. These are the donors that get email. These are the donors that want a letter. These are the donors I need to meet with twice a year. And hopefully you can segment people that way so that you can then customize how you interact with them. Next, please. So if I'm coming back to talk to you, can we include your family? And this is especially true for your older donors. It is helpful for the kids and the grandkids to know who Pa and Grandpa and Grandma and Grandpa like to give to. It doesn't mean they're going to carry it on for the next generation, but it's a way of introducing what these folks give to the next generation. And it may yield some additional gifts and some additional donors. If you're talking with people at all about planned gifts, legacy gifts, when people pass, super important that the family know and the family be involved so they don't challenge it later on. Next slide. Who else do you know that might give? Will you introduce us? Donors know donors. And so it is not too bold to say, is there anybody else you can think of that might also want to support this work? And if they say, well, you know, my friend Harold, you say, well, could you drop him a note on our behalf, or would you introduce me, or how do we make this work? Next, please. You know, this isn't for everybody, but if you find somebody who is on fire and really likes your work, it's okay to say to them, you know what, you're impressing me with your commitment and passion for our organization. Can you help us raise money? Is there some way we can plug you into the fundraising? Because when people hear you, they're going to want to give too. And so, you know, somebody might say, you know, I could come and tell my story, or I could write something for you, or I could host a party for you, or what do you need? And it might simply be stuffing envelopes at the next mailing party if you ever do that again. Next slide. Finally, I think it's okay to ask people when they give. So, you know, you might say, I'm here, it's November. Are you one of those people that typically gives at the end of the year? Should I be seeing you every November? Are you someone who I can approach more often? I mean, how does this work for you? Do you structure your giving in some way that would be useful for me to know? And, you know, you want to be respectful about this. You don't want to pry, but I think it's a fair question because it's a customer service question. It's like, how do I interact with you, and when are the best times for me to interact with you? And I think it's okay to ask that. So next slide. That's a lot of stuff we covered this evening. And we still have a few minutes for questions, which is great. We're going to show you a few more slides, but let's see what we've got. And I think, Bree, we can probably take the slide deck away. Let's see what pops up. Again, chat is awesome. And if you want to unmute and ask a question or make a comment, maybe you want to amplify something I've already said because it's important, that's great too. Zach, I see a raised hand, so why don't you unmute?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate you taking my question, Andy. Back when you were talking about the giving chart, I know you'd mentioned that in a previous talk. Is there any strategy you'd recommend directing somebody towards a particular level, or you want to leave that as an open free?
Yeah, this is a great question. So what you're asking about is, do I steer donors to like one of the higher brackets? Or
just one in particular. So
yeah.
For instance, I have a side project I'm working on, and there's a particular program that's going to have kind of a standardized cost. So you could say this particular level would fund, you know, one person in the program, or, you know, give it some context instead of just numbers on the page.
You know, that is a classic fundraising strategy. And sometimes we call it sponsorship. And it's like, would you like to sponsor one person in the program? This is what it's going to cost for a year to underwrite, for example, one veteran coming through this program and being served for the full year. And I think that's a lovely pitch. Now, if you want to go further, and this is going to depend on who the beneficiary is, because they're not going to, you know, often it's anonymous in both directions. But I mean, I'll tell you a very quick story about this. Many years ago, when my daughter was in high school, she got a scholarship to go to Outward Bound, which is a program where they take kids out in the woods and they, you know, give them some harrowing experiences to try and strengthen them up. And she had, you know, a harrowing and also amazing experience. And the deal being a scholarship kid is she had to come back when it was over and write a letter anonymously to whoever her donor was about what the experience meant to her. And she wrote she was like 17, 16, I can't remember, but she wrote an amazing letter that I thought, damn, as a donor, if I got this, I would be so impressed. And she sent it off to Outward Bound. They sent it off to the donor. And I thought, what a beautiful way to thank a donor is for the beneficiary to talk about how the program was meaningful to them. So I'm not sure how that would work in your case, Zach, but I would have you think about, is there some way to build a bridge between the donor and the beneficiary if you're going in that direction? And that'll be, and you know, frankly, for someone actually, part of the deal is, you know, we're going to scholarship you in, but in exchange, you need to actually write something about what this meant to you. And maybe it's used to give to the donor, or maybe it's used in your marketing materials, or maybe it's used in fundraising, or, you know, and maybe it's anonymous, or maybe the person says, you can use my name, it's fine. So yeah, excellent question. And I think stipulating what the money buys is often a good strategy. Are there other questions?
I think Zach might have a follow-on question. Is that right, Zach?
I do, if that's okay. I'm not trying to hijack the meeting here.
Bring it.
So you brought up a good point with our work with the Fox Valley Veterans Council. We help with basic needs for veterans, and we find it very difficult to have veterans who want to have their name or any
right.
sort of, you know, information attached with any marketing that we do. Like, hey, these are the people we helped. They don't want their name and picture on anything because they're embarrassed that they needed assistance. Do you have any advice along those lines?
I have thoughts, but let me kick it to the group, because I imagine there's other people on this circle who have thought about this and wrestled with this. So let me just open it up. Anybody have an answer for Zach? Like, how do you finesse that?
I used to work at a nonprofit, and one of the most moving videos I saw was of a case manager reading a letter that was written to them by a veteran, and then they left the name out. And it was very touching because the veteran could say things in writing that they didn't feel like they could say face to face. And because they got to remain anonymous, it was still authentic, it was still emotional, but it was private.
Nice, that's good.
And they had permission to share it.
Yeah, let's see who else I see. Is it John? You got to unmute.
Let's try to find where the raise hand button was.
You got that. I saw your actual physical hand.
That's really, so that is a really tough needle to thread. Like with certainly not only this sector, but many, many service sectors. And yeah, I believe that being honest about that exact fact sometimes, it's certainly within the range of a personal meeting. Like you can say, I believe it's okay to, talk about stories through your own voice, even if it's not the voice of the person who was originally helped. I think that's okay to do. And I think that's helpful in the absence of, it's not a replacement for an individualized story for sure, but it is, in the absence of being able to get a one-on-one, a personal account, which is not easy, really not easy in certain sectors. I think just being as upfront and forward about telling stories, but mentioning the fact that this person wants to be anonymous. And most of the time, I think the reason that they want to be anonymous will be pretty obvious.
And, Zach, you just told us a story, which is we serve a lot of people who are ashamed that they need service. And that's one of the reasons we do the work, is to try and break down that shame or break down that fear. And I would love to tell you about these people, but they want to be anonymous, and I want to respect that. And that's part of who we are as an organization, is we respect people's dignity and anonymity. And so that's what I can share with you. And I'd make it a positive if you could, is to say, we have such deep respect in our organization that we don't out people who don't want to be outed. And, maybe that is a different kind of pitch, and that might actually work for some donors. Joey's got your hand up. Joey.
Yes. So we actually had a donor event on Veterans Day. When we provide services to our veteran community, once their case is closed, a quality of service survey is sent out. And in that survey, there is a question in there, would you be willing to tell your story, or speak more on the service that you provided to our donors. We actually asked that in the quality of service. And in the comments, I've had many meetings where I have just a printout of all the comments, and I will just take, keeping it anonymous, just read directly from the comments what what a veteran has said, once the case is closed. So after the completion of their service. In the donor event, we actually, because of the data that we've collected and the stories that we've collected, we invited two veterans to tell their story. And one was a single dad that has two boys. He was unable to get childcare, and just having his kids there actually enhanced our event.
Yes.
Because it showed the dynamics of the family and the challenges that he was facing, being a single dad with two children, and also transitioning out of the military. So it actually worked to our benefit that he didn't have childcare. So I would be, when you're trying to get those stories and collect those testimonies, make sure that when you're trying to assess what services that you provide through the organization, that you take a moment of, collecting that feedback and getting consent that they would be willing to tell their story more, because that's how we were able to invite those two individuals, is because they offered that.
Yeah, right.
To us.
And you put it in the survey and you said, here's a question.
Right.
And that's huge. So good on you. That's very smart. And I totally agree about the kids. I mean, it's a running joke in fundraising is that you want to send somebody out to do donor visits who's visibly pregnant, because it's really hard to say no to a pregnant woman. So not that anyone needs to be pregnant anytime if you don't want to be, but if you happen to be and you happen to be fundraising, it's an opportunity. We're into overtime, and I'm happy to answer questions until they're all gone, but I want to acknowledge that. I would also say, here's a crazy idea per this topic we've been talking about. If you had somebody with some animation skills and could put together a 2 or 3 minute animated video with some of the testimonials and stuff you're talking about, that could be a way to tell people's story without revealing who they are and without even showing their faces, because it would be animated instead. And that could be pretty interesting and fun. Cool. Any other questions? Last call. All right, so let's put up the slides. I want to show a couple more slides quick, and then I'll hand it back to, I guess, to Dee to close it down.
Sounds good.
All right, one more slide. Next, please. So I'm just planting this as a little flag, and we're not going to work on it now. But if these sessions are useful, that's great. We only know if they're useful if you actually implement anything. So what I would ask you to do in the next day or two as you have a moment is, okay, I've been through this series, or I went to the session last night. It's like, what did you learn and what are you going to do with it? So I am prompting you all to do action planning, and it's perhaps possible that my colleagues at the Woodruff Foundation will at some point follow up with a survey or anything else and say, what's something you plan to implement coming out of this series? Because that would be really good to know. Next slide. One of my books, it's really right on point for what we're talking about tonight. This is a book about how to set up appointments, meet with donors, and ask in person. So you can go ahead and check that out if it's interesting to you. And finally, my face and my follow-up is there. So should you get any other questions we didn't get to tonight, or you want to talk about something, feel free to contact me. I'm glad to try and serve you if I can. And I think the slides can go away. And Dee, I get the last word.
Wow. Just a tremendous thank you to you, Andy, for sharing your knowledge with us. Every single call, I learned something, and so great to see so many of our local partners engaged and, sharing that they watched the recordings and shared them with their team and had a strategy session on a Saturday.
Yeah.
That was Ron Stark in San Diego. So just a big thank you. I know we're over time, but feel free, anyone who wasn't able to chime in with a question or a comment, you have our emails. And as always, we appreciate you engaging in these sessions. And I hope 1 week from today, all of you will be sitting down with family and friends for a nice meal.
Good. Happy holidays, everyone. Go out and raise a lot of money. Make us all proud. And
Take care.
thanks again to the Bob Woodruff Foundation for hosting us all.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.